Okay, well, I think we should start. I can see others popping in, and so I'll just begin. And by the time the real program begins, we should have everybody online. Welcome. It's nice to have everybody join us today. The storms the other night, we weren't the only ones who had them. I talked to friends in Denver, and I was on the phone with PCMA and Chicago, and pretty much everybody was having wild and wacky weather, including tornado warnings and other things. So all we need are the locusts, and then 2020 will be absolutely complete. I can just say that I don't know about all of you, but I'm going to have one heck of a New Year's Eve party to welcome in 2021. In fact, we have a big, huge dome. Maybe we'll have it here.
There's a new business strategy for us.
Because the end of 2020 can't come fast enough. So we do have a special guest with us. I'll get to introducing him in just a moment. And then we also have both Eric Janicki and Brian Hall on the call, and they will also be giving you both sales and marketing updates. You'll see an interesting sash across Eric's chest there. He had shoulder surgery yesterday and was back at work this morning. So nothing holds him down. So we're glad to see him. And, Brian does not have one of those straps. So at least we won't have to hear the usual jousting back and forth about whose strap is better, like whose lawn is better.
Well, I love that, Chris's metaphor was that it looks like a beauty pageant, piece sash that you would adorn yourself with. So thank you very much, Eric, for, bringing your beauty pageant skills to our webinar today.
Well, and you can see, Brian, that I'm wearing the beauty pageant sash, which means I won.
Okay, I was wrong about the usual jousting not happening. It is happening in full force. A couple of things that I just wanted to note before we go to the rest of the program is, and I had mentioned it on the call last week, I think, and maybe the week before, was that we had brought together a subset of our larger working group on large venues. The working group on large venues, which included attractions, had met in April and in early May and put forth the protocols that were adopted by both the city and the county. And then sometime after that, it became clear that some of the largest fixed seat venues had some different needs than some of the others. And so we did pull together a couple of weeks ago a subset of the larger group that contains only people who have venues that are large fixed seat venues. And they had a meeting. We sent out a survey. We got responses back from that survey, and Barry Draper had just distributed that back to that group for further discussion. So we'll be back to you again, in the not too distant future with some other information to share if you have a venue that does have fixed seats, and that maybe is some information that will be helpful to you if you do. The other thing I wanted to note is that for those of you who are in St. Louis City, in case you didn't see it, the mayor's office released probably about an hour ago the order from the public health director, Dr. Fred Eccles, has released a new health order that takes effect tomorrow, which closes down bars, restaurants, and establishments that serve or permit alcoholic beverages to be served for consumption by guests on the premises at 11 p.m. So that's all city venues that serve alcohol for consumption on the premises tomorrow night will have to close at 11 p.m. regardless of whether they have a 1 a.m. license or a 2 a.m. license or a 3 a.m. license. This will supersede that and will require them to close at 11 p.m. And that is very specifically because the numbers of positive cases have been increasing primarily amongst citizens in their 20s and their 30s. And they are attributing the fact that those young people in their 20s and 30s are out way too late and taking off their masks as the evening progresses. So that order, as I said, will go into place. It also reduces, for large venues and all of those facilities, reduces the capacity down to 50% of the normal capacity. As of today, that is at 75%, but that's going to be rolled back effective tomorrow to 50%. Those of you who have large venues and restaurants know that the 75% isn't really achieved anyway. It can't really be done in most circumstances because of the 6-foot distancing that takes precedent over capacity. So, but it really does limit perhaps some of those where you're just talking about total number of people instead of people sitting at tables or in actual seating configurations of some kind. So that is, if you're in the city of St. Louis, take a look at that. It is out on their website. Barry will also include it in the recap that he sends out, but you might want to get that sooner if you haven't already seen it. And I'm sure it's actually probably already available on the Post-Dispatch's website or something else. The business journals or somebody else will have put it out. I think those were my only updates that I wanted to make sure that I touch base on before we welcomed our speaker. You know, we've been really fortunate to have some really good experts in a variety of different aspects of the travel and tourism industry to speak to the group every Wednesday or other day of the week if we switched it to a different day. Since we began doing this in late March. And we've not had MMGY on the call. And I'm so glad that we're able to welcome Chris Davidson because MMGY has been doing a weekly travel intentions survey, and he's going to share the results of that with us. And this is on a national basis. So Chris, thank you so much. We really appreciate your joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Katie, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for the opportunity. It's, I love the opportunity to talk to friends again in St. Louis. As I was telling the team here earlier when we first hopped on, I spent a couple of years in St. Louis out at what was at the time a Harrah's property. Now I believe is Hollywood casinos, and so spent a couple of years living in Chesterfield and really enjoyed the time there before joining the dark side of the industry, the agency world, right? So I'll kind of walk you through a study or some highlights from a study that we've been doing here for really since March, and we've done it as Kitty pointed out. She actually said weekly. We've done it. They started bi-weekly for quite a while, and we've transitioned for the last couple of months to looking at the results on a monthly basis. And we also have cut the data a number of different ways to create something called the Travel Safety Barometer, which I'll show you some of the results from that as well. So if we go to the next slide, just the overview of this study is, as I mentioned, we're going out. And asking travelers specifically about their travel intentions, their perceptions of safety, how COVID has affected, their daily lives. And so again, I've kind of taken a slice of that, the results from this month, and wanted to share that with you. I would point out too that these studies are available. We're doing this on behalf of the industry, so they're not something we charge for. If you want to visit our site at mmgyintel.com. These are posted on a monthly basis, typically the middle of the month. And this most recent report that I'm showing you an excerpt from, these reports are available for download there as well. We're also doing a study, a B2B study of travel advisors, also asking about what they're seeing in the industry in terms of the effect of COVID on their businesses. So I would point those out. Feel free to download those in their entirety, but I'm happy to share some of the highlights with you today. So if we go to the next slide, just to give you a quick sense of who we are, and I'll make this 30 seconds or less. I oversee a group called the MMGY Travel Intelligence. It's the research arm of the MMGY Global Portfolio. And some of the brand names you may recognize from this portfolio of research are the Portrait of American Travelers, Travel Horizons, which we've been doing since 2007, and our DK Shiflet data as well. So I'm guessing many of you have heard of at least one of those and hopefully all of them. But again, thanks for the opportunity. So the study methodology detailed on the next slide here, we went out and it is, as Kitty pointed out, a nationally representative study. We've got 1,200 respondents, each of whom has traveled either for leisure or business in the past 12 months, and all of whom are at least 18 years of age. This most recent wave was from the end of July. And again, you can download prior month reports as well, although most of that we try to detail in terms of the month-to-month progression in the most current version of the report. If you're interested in the statistical measures at the bottom, you can see that the error margin is plus or minus 2.8% at a 95% level of confidence. That's usually the most exciting detail that I share with audiences. So we can go to the next slide. First, again, next slide will just detail demographics. Again, you can see it's fairly representative across the different age demos, as well as gender, and about 2/3 of the respondents report being married. The household income does skew a bit higher. You'll see 42% actually make 100,000 or more, which is great in terms of the larger proportion of overall travel spending. Would come on the higher end of the spectrum. So obviously good to understand what's happening there, although it is higher, obviously, given the median income in the country is in the mid-60s. Employment status, you see there, a large majority employed, about 1/3 have children in the household, and then we actually do measure political affiliation. The majority do respond with that information, so it's always an interesting split to look at. And I'd be happy to kind of detail that if anyone has any questions at the end in terms of are Republicans more likely to say they're going to travel and feel safe traveling, or are Democrats or independents, or neither?
I'd be curious too, Chris, about race and looking at differences between race. I don't know if you segment by that as well.
We do. I don't actually I don't have that data in here, but would be happy to follow up with any responses on that as well. So go to the next slide. We'll kind of get into the nuts and bolts. Travel intentions for both leisure and business. Go to the next slide. We've summarized that here on this first slide and looked at the trend line ever since the end of March. And you can see it stayed actually somewhat steady, although it has dropped off a little bit both for leisure travel and business travel here over the last couple of months. And what's interesting is that it hasn't dropped off more. As I look at the numbers, for example, for leisure travel, here you can look at, if we go to the next slide, it actually details it by the distribution across each of the 5 scale points. And you can see that that it actually stays relatively flat. In this most recent wave, excuse me. And a lot of that you see, even though there was a huge surge in cases, it's really surprising that the safety perception, or the overall intention rather, to travel stayed fairly consistent. I think people have started to adapt to what is somewhat of a new normal. It's still considerably lower than you would expect, and we have that measure on a benchmarking basis across a number of other studies that we ask about. But at the same time, it's not like we're seeing it continue to decline as the COVID stories continue to worsen. So that is somewhat encouraging. On the next slide, you see the business travel is detailed here. And one thing that stands out is the black bar on the right side for this most recent wave. And you'll see that 35% of respondents say that they are now extremely, or not at all likely to travel for business in the next 6 months. And again, that's a concerning number. I think you're starting to see people really weigh the benefits of business travel against what they see as the potential risks, whereas leisure travel is more, I got to get out, I got to experience, I got to go out on vacation, and it's important to my life. I think business travel, there's a different consideration. And we're starting to see some of the impact of that And I think as people are increasingly comfortable with Zoom and WebEx and all the other video conferencing technologies, I think they're starting to question that. Now, again, we argue that there's significant advantages waiting to be had by companies who decide to continue to invest in business travel. For many reasons, I'd be happy to detail separately, but nevertheless, we do think we're seeing some transition there on the business travel side that could be a much longer road to recovery. Go to the next slide. We've kind of the distribution there across different upcoming timeframes when people expect to travel. And if you look at the leisure travel side on the left, you'll see that I think that equates to somewhere around 63%. Or 62% say that they, collectively, the combination of the first three bars there would expect to travel in the next 6 months. And you can see that it declines from there in terms of percentage of respondents. And yet on the business travel side, you see that that number remains less than 50%. And keep in mind, these are people that said both for business travel on the left and for leisure travel on the left and business travel on the right. These are people that traveled at least once for leisure travel or for business travel within the past 12 months. So these are active travelers, half of which are saying now they don't expect to travel for business in the next 6 months. So really, some concerning numbers there for sure. If we go down, just kind of click through this next title slide for travel intentions by category. I've just highlighted a few things here from the longer version we have online. One is you can see here that there's a significant jump in terms of the intent to travel by personal car. That number, again, you can see just in this most recent wave, even in the face of a lot of the negative news and the surge in cases and so forth I mentioned, the intent to travel by car increased from 67% up to 73%. These are top two box in this most recent wave, whereas everything else either stayed flat or declined. And you can see just the gap between the two, 73%, the next closest is 32%. Their travel, you can see that travel detail below. And, clearly what we're seeing is people are, it has to do with the perceived safety of traveling by personal car. And we're seeing a significant rise in road trip travel and the intent to travel in that way. We're also seeing, if you go to the next slide, the distances that people are willing to drive for that road trip are increasing as well. So on the right side, if you see in the most recent wave and you combine the top two boxes, you see that 38% of people now say that they're willing to drive 300 or more miles for a road trip. And that number is up from just from 33% just a month ago. So people have come to accept that, this is going to be the way they travel in the near term. And I think they're accepting that they're going to have to drive a little further, and they'll happily do so to get that vacation, which again is a good sign in many ways.
It'll be interesting to see if this dynamic changes seasonally, given the fact that obviously during the summertime period, your sojourns can be more distant, whereas in the fall, I think that people are probably going to revert to more proximate travel.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, one of the slides that we have, I don't think I have it in here. In fact, I know I don't have it in here, but we asked people if they expect, compared to a typical year, looking at the fall season, do they expect to travel more than they typically would, about the same or less? And there is definitely a percentage weighted, and I'm blanking on the exact percentage, that said they expect to travel more than they typically would during the fall season, but it is significantly higher than we would typically see. So that's led to us actually developing a campaign that we are working with a number of different destinations on in more templated fashion, to reduce the overall creative design and investment, but something we call stretch season. So anyway, it's an interesting look at how do we convince people to really start planning aggressively for the fall season, and many of those are obviously going to be road trips. I've just highlighted a couple of these different metrics. We ask about a whole series of different travel behaviors and people's likelihood to take part in them. Looked at here hotels and resorts and vacation rentals. over the next 6 months. And you can see that those numbers are actually rising a little bit. So month over month, again, in the face of a lot of rough news, we're seeing that the overall intent to stay in a hotel and a vacation home is actually increasing. Now, again, it's on a low base. We're watching trends as well as the overall net figure. If you look at the next slide, it looks at the business meetings, and this is where I wish I had some better news to share. But clearly, the black, the trend line there looks at the intent to attend an offsite business meeting, and the red is an intent to attend a conference or convention, and both of those are very, very low. Clearly, and those things are, when you compare, when we ask about a whole series of different things, including things like eating in a restaurant, or going to an indoor concert, or going to an outdoor concert. We ask about a lot of different things, and these numbers are very consistent with the numbers we would see in terms of intent to attend, for example, an indoor concert or an indoor sporting event. They're pretty low on the overall spectrum. If we go to the next slide and skip through the cover slide there, we ask about concern that people have specifically about contracting COVID, and we're tracking that. And this is a distribution by wave since the inception of the survey, and you can see that while it's hard to make out, there is a slight increase in respondents being concerned about contracting COVID themselves. And then on the next slide, we see a similar slight uptick in concern that they have about members of their household contracting COVID-19. So again, while those concerns continue to rise, the perception of safety of various travel activities remains relatively consistent. Obviously, again, the net numbers are fairly low. And then on the next slide, we look at I highlight what will impact people's decision-making related to travel here in the near future. And at the top of the list, as you would expect, all of those things are related specifically to the slowdown of COVID-19, and that's either in the U.S., worldwide, a reduction in the advisory level for travel, et cetera. I point this out because, one, that's fairly obvious, but what may be a little bit less obvious, or a question that people have asked us, certainly anyway, is if you look further down at like great travel deals is down at the bottom, or not in the bottom, in the bottom middle of the list. And the most recent wave, you see that only 30% of people say that a great travel deal impact their travel decision. And you compare that to, again, almost 6 in 10 are talking about the reduction in the spread of COVID-19. So we're watching that very carefully to look at things like when household finances and job security and great travel deals, when those things start to inch up and the impact of COVID starts to come down. And presumably that will be when treatments and vaccines and so forth are much more on the near-term horizon line. But that's what we're seeing at this point. And then in the last just couple of minutes, I just want to highlight a few things. If you go down to this data comes out, it's the Travel Safety Barometer. It comes out directly from data where we ask about perception of safety of travel in our Travel Intentions Pulse survey. But we also layer in some DK Shiflett data to give us good inputs on incidence of these things, and create an algorithm that then translates some of the safety scores to barometers by different travel categories. So I will go through that and just give you, again, a sampling of what some of those look like now. You see on the first slide here that the domestic travel, if you go back one, sorry, the overall domestic travel is at 45. This is on a 0 to 100 scale, with 0 being exceedingly unsafe and 100 being perfectly safe. I think typically, although we don't have the exact benchmark data, from the data we do have, we would estimate this would typically in a non-COVID environment be somewhere in the United States, at least somewhere in the 85 to 95 range, where safety is typically not a major consideration for people traveling, other than it's a basic expectation. But you can see here now, currently at a 45, it is down slightly from a 46 last wave, and the international travel is lower than that at 30, as you would expect, down from 31. So again, I point out that there's not a great deal of variance on a month-to-month basis there. But you can see on a relative basis, I'll show you some of the other specific component pieces of that as well. So if we go to the next one, I talked before about the transportation, and you can see the perception of safety in cars. The travel barometer for transportation has increased again from 60 to 64. And you can see below, again, if you download the presentation online, you can really study that in more detail, or you can certainly send me questions as well. But you can see that the overall perception of safety for transportation has been rising and largely driven by the perception of safety of personal vehicles. Although we are seeing the numbers increase for example, domestic flights, which have, when you compare it to the perception of safety from a couple of months ago, is up rather significantly, although again, overall, relatively low. Go to the next slide. It just breaks it out here by personal car and taking domestic flights, just so you can get a sense, the relative sense of where those travel safety barometers are. Again, almost 80% or 80 on almost 79 on a 100-point scale for the travel by car barometer, compared to 38 for flights. Now, flight was, I believe, around 22 only a couple of months ago, so it has risen considerably. On the next slide, we talk about hotels and vacation rental, and you can see here again. I'm sorry? Okay. The overall lodging safety barometer is at 47, again, up slightly from the previous month. And you can see there again on the trend line of this barometer score going back to March.
One quick comment in reference to this. I think it makes the case for the hotel organizations and marketing folks that are part of this call, is that we can't take it for granted that people perceive us to be safe, because clearly we could be perceived as more safe than we're presently being perceived, which argues for putting the health and cleanliness and safety aspect very much front and center, particularly when attracting leisure travelers. We had just written a blog about a week ago that sort of described all the safety measures that leading hotel companies in St. Louis are taking to ensure guest safety. And I think it's something that we can all amplify.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that we're actually, and this may be being used elsewhere, I don't know, I just know this, we're talking about it, but you know, talking about it as cleanliness theater. Whereas, you know, traditionally a lot of this stuff would happen overnight behind the scenes, is hidden from the guest view as much as possible. And increasingly there's value in actually conveying to the guests very openly that we are actively cleaning and showing that this is happening on a recurring basis throughout their stay. So it's a very, very different mindset. And, you know, having been in the hospitality business, as I mentioned, on the property, it's almost hard to imagine that being the case, but it's a very different world right now. So if we look at the next slide, it's just a couple left here, and this one has to do or compares the hotel barometer with the vacation rental barometer, and the perception of safety is actually higher right now for a hotel or resort. Although we are seeing increases in the vacation rental side, and I suspect that we'll start to see that maybe tip the other way as well, partly because, you know, the perception of control is typically a bit higher. You're not in a crowded lobby or in a crowded restaurant. You're typically staying for an extended period of time in a little bit larger unit, and potentially cooking yourself and so forth. So I think there are a lot of factors would indicate that we would expect to see the perceived safety of staying in a vacation rental a bit higher. Although I think it's good news that the perception of safety of staying in a hotel or resort has remained where it is, and has also been growing over the past couple of sessions, as you saw earlier. Business travel, again, I won't harp on this next slide, but you can see, that's been pretty consistently low. The black bar and the trend line on the right shows the perception of safety related to attending a conference or convention. So we know that's going to be a challenge, and obviously it's going to be a long road back, I think, in many respects. But we've got to be up to the challenge as an industry. And then the last two slides, one is here kind of breaking out that, between offsite business meeting, and you can see that's fairly, considerably higher than the attending a conference or convention. As I mentioned, they're both fairly low. And then on the last slide, it details, it's kind of overwhelming gauge time here, but these are barometers for a number of specific travel activities. And you can see, compare these to each other and also compare them to some of the other ones with lodging, transportation, business travel, et cetera. One of the ones that is lowest overall, which is not featured here for obvious reasons for you, is not all that relevant, but in terms of just a comparable, the cruise industry is, I think, one of the lowest now. I believe that's at 24. But you can compare that to attending an indoor concert or festival at 25, and business travel or a conference and convention was right in that same range as well. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we're seeing. Obviously, again, some clear challenges in terms of recovery on the horizon line, but I think there are some encouraging signs. The intent to travel by car, the receptivity to driving further distances, and the general view that people have settled into an expectation of safety, at least in the near term, that hopefully will only go up from here. So we'll be watching that carefully, but would be happy to address any questions, or if anyone wants to reach out, there's my email address, and again, just on mmgyintel.com, you can download these reports as well.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just monitoring for questions, and I want to remind everyone that if you would like to ask Chris a question, please use the question function or the chat. Julie Krull just wrote, and she said, "Thank you so much for this great content. Will these slides be available following this call?" And the answer to that is affirmative. Barry will be sending these slides out as part of the recap of this call. If you don't mind, I have a question as we're providing folks with, including each one of us on the screen. I've got a question concerning demography, and I'm sure you've done crosstabs in reference to intent by age cohort. Do you see any difference between younger people and older people concerning travel intent and perception of safety?
Yeah, we've looked at that in a couple of different places, and I looked at it most recently, and we're about to release our Wave 3 Travel Horizons study. And one of the things that we see is that intent to travel and interest in travel connected in terms of, depending on which question we're looking at, but both of those are higher the higher income you go, and they're also higher from an age perspective the older you are. So we're seeing intent to travel, which is somewhat counterintuitive, and it may relate to available time, discretionary income, a lot of the traditional factors that would affect ability to travel financially. But we are seeing that intent to travel increase for Gen X and boomers over and above millennials. And I think part of that too is, again, if you think about the type of travel, I talk a lot about road trips, and we do see that the older the respondent gets, the more likely they are to say that they feel comfortable driving in their car, and the more likely they are to say they're willing to drive much further distances for vacation. So that's been a very interesting part of what we've observed to this point.
No, you're right. That is a little bit counterintuitive.
Chris, it's Kitty. I've got a question. So I guess I'm a little puzzled. Maybe I'm hoping you could shed some light on the difference between the intent to take a business trip versus the intent to attend a meeting or conference, because the intent to take a business trip was higher, and yet companies are prohibiting people from traveling for safety reasons, but also for budgetary reasons. The customers aren't in their offices, so you can't actually go to somebody's office and make a call. And then, of course, there are the safety concerns about travel in general. So that affects a business trip. On the conference and convention side, which was at a lower rate, I'm wondering, because all those factors will come into play. Again, will a company permit somebody to attend a conference? Will they pay for them, the safety concerns and all that? But the difference there is that is it because the conferences and conventions aren't actually being organized? And so when you ask them the question about their intent to do it, does the ability to actually attend a conference or convention come into play in that at all? Am I being clear about that difference? Question?
No, and I think that's entirely possible. I think part of what we're seeing, at least my theory on why the results would shake out the way they do, is that attending a corporate meeting, a business meeting, is something that is typically more likely to be one-on-one or small groups. It may be sales people. Again, it's not just people in our industry answering this question, it's travelers in general. So it could be people who make their living by traveling by car and meeting with people from a sales perspective. So I think those meetings would typically be considered a little safer, a little more controlled given the smaller groups, whereas people looking to attend and it's specific to a conference or convention, which would imply a much larger group. And it may also imply something that's more discretionary in nature. So for example, I have a need to, for my business, I need to go out and meet with people. I need to sell, I need to present, whatever it might be. I need to do those things, and I'm willing to take some risk to do it. But I'm less willing to go to a big conference. I'll wait till next year to do that because I don't see it as critical to my business. Again, those conferences are just critical in terms of networking and reasons why are vital to the industry and to business overall. But that's my interpretation of what we would be seeing in the response data in terms of why people would feel a little more comfortable. I do think it's an interesting hypothesis that you offer. It may just be that people recognize that those are less likely to be options at this point too, and you could very well do some of that in the response data as well.
Yeah, good, thank you. We're having a little bit of technical issue with you. I think you're breaking up a little bit. So I don't know if that's just on my. Can you hear us?
Response is really good, too good. Yeah. I can hear you fine. I apologize if I'm coming through very well.
Yeah, no.
That's right. I think it's just probably a slightly weak internet connection. It seems to be. Oh, you're back.
Oh, there, you're back. You're back. It was just a couple of minutes there. But. Well, any other?
Trust Google Fiber, but.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit again there. Brian, do we have any other questions for Chris?
We don't at this point, but what I would like to suggest, Chris, if you don't mind, if you could just hang on for a few more minutes, give folks an opportunity to ask any questions. We'll invite Eric Janicki to provide his sales update, and then we can loop back and see if there are any new questions. And if there are, we'll dive in. And if not, we'll say thank you and really appreciate you being part of our call this afternoon. So, Mr. Janicki, beauty pageant winner.
All right, thank you, Brian. Chris, thanks for that information. Come back when the numbers are going higher.
Yeah.
But just to start off, again, Kitty knows I'm always the optimist, always looking at the glass half full. So every time I read something, I try to look at the silver lining. So we are starting to see some trending, some new bookings. Unfortunately, many of the new bookings, and I applaud some of the hotels, seem to have getting some traction for smaller meetings. Brian and I were sharing that earlier on a different call, that it looks like demand on the mid-sized meeting is starting to get some traction, where larger meetings are still sort of stuck in the sand, you could say, as to a little hesitancy to book, and probably because there's more risk with the larger meeting from attendance as well as from a budgetary standpoint. But for August, it's only a few days into August, but we've booked 2 events meetings and 1,900 room nights. We did get a new lead, which is a rebook, which we're happy to get. It rescheduled Southern Gas Association's rescheduling from July this year to August of next year, which we were happy to pick up. We also received reconfirmation of USA Fencing for this December. plus it's a regional event, and they're now looking, and I think a lot has to do with us hosting Ninja Warriors and a couple other events and the protocols. They're looking to add maybe another regional to this event to make the program larger. So Gary Shirk is back and he's working on that. Upcoming activities, we will continue to work about the Connect virtual meeting event we have scheduled for this August. Our participation in both Connect Marketplace in Vegas in October and Envision in November. And I want to touch on some of the TAP reports. So Mark, if you go to the next slide. Oh, first territories. Mark, go to the next slide. This is available to there you go. This is available to anybody. We showed last week the new territories. And so Brian's team, with the information provided by Stephanie, was able to put in a nice graphic of how our sales department is deployed. So this is available to anybody who wants it. Please just do an email to Barry or myself or to Stephanie, and we'll provide it, but it divides it up. You can see with the reduction of staff, we pretty much geographically divided into 3 sections of the country. But the biggest change is that Dana will be doing all corporate, and then we have the vertical markets, of course, with Gary with sports and religious and fraternal with Patty Barnett and Stephanie. So, and Keith Levy is heading up strategic accounts and our licensing and contracting. So, so some changes. We have Joanne Hunsaker is coming back on Monday, so we will have her aboard. So we're excited about that as well. So from a sales, you could say future moving sales department, our staff will be intact starting Monday. Mark, if you want to go next slide. Okay, I was able to get some, I had a conference call this morning with the people from Nolan who do the TAP report to get a little insight of where things are trending and going. So our peer set, the peer TAP report lags about 3 weeks from the our PACE TAP report. So this is for ending June 30th, but I wanted to show some trending that is, again, the glass half full. You could see for December, for 2020, we're at 42% of PACE, and our comp set, our primary comp set, which is Columbus, Detroit, Indianapolis, Louisville, Minneapolis, and Nashville, are at 42%. But overall, back in January, our peer set, this peer set was above us on overall 8-year pace. So what I attribute this primarily to is the great leadership from Stephanie and the salespeople being able to rebook our groups for future years and put them in place to maintain our overall pace. So you will also notice the amount of, I think it's on this one, it might be on next, oh, our tentative room nights for next year at 155,000. That shows next year is going to be a good year because we're getting a lot of groups from this year to rebook for next year. So in about 3 weeks, we should have, or 2 to 3 weeks, we should have the TAP report ending July 31st. So Brian, Mark, go to the next slide. Okay, did you, okay. The next 2 slides are really important to us because it will show some trending. Here is overall city PACE report. So you can see we're down 251,000 room nights for 2020 at a PACE percentage of 35%. You've dropped 145 meetings, but overall, we're only in the 8 years, only 189,000 down. So we are, if you took 20 and just flatlined it, we would be far above our 8-year pace. So again, I'm looking at this from a positive end. But one of the other things Kitty brought up this morning about need years, you could see from, and you'll see on the next slide, which will be our America Center, our even years of 22, 24, and 26 tend to be the years that we need most emphasis. So one of the things that we're going to look in sales is that you're always looking for repeat business of where it falls. It looks like the odd years are our stronger years in all years in the past as well as going out. So we're going to put a little more emphasis on where you go to that. 25, of course, is our strongest year in the future. Mark, and finish up with the next slide. Okay. Here you can see the same trend line with our America Center PACE report for 8 years ending July 31st. What I take as a very positive, I want you to look at the tentative room nights for the ongoing years. One thing that Carly from Nolan shared with me, she said, compared to other cities, our peer set cities, our tentative volume and our trend lines from PACE are stronger than most of the competitive cities we deal with, which is what we're measuring ourselves on right now is, okay, what does our funnel look like? So our funnel looks pretty strong for next year because we're taking business from this year, moving it over, but it is consistently fairly strong going forward. We do have work to do in the out years, but those associations or meetings aren't really sharing RFPs at this point. So it's going to happen. It's just the lead times are going to be a little shorter than it has been in the past. I do want to share that I had a call with Cvent, and they're putting together a comparative data report for me, and I should have it for next week's call, comparing our lead volume compared to our competitive set cities, because our lead volume, at least from the CVC side, has been a little anemic. And I asked them, what contributes to this? Is it reflective to all the cities in our comp set? So they're going to do an analysis for me between us and our comp set cities. So I will share that next week to everybody. So I don't know if there are any questions, Brian, but that's it for us.
Well, actually, Eric, there's one more question for Chris, and the question concerns party composition. You indicated that there's a positive correlation between age and intent to travel, and there's a positive correlation between income and intent to travel. What about the presence or not of kids in a household?
I gotta unmute myself. Sorry. Is it coming through a little bit clearer now?
You're great. Yep.
Okay. Terrific. Yeah, it's a great question. For a while, we actually saw the intent to travel and perception of safety of travel lower for households that had children in them. And we actually saw that. I'm looking at the data points here for the last couple of waves. I'm still waiting to get that breakout for this most recent wave, but the last two have actually seen those with children in the household, their intent to travel has risen up above those without children in the household. And my working theory is that people with kids have gotten to the point where they're starting to see the chances of their summer vacation declining to very quickly, and they're going a little bit crazy.
And the probability of strangling their children is probably increasing too.
Not that I have any personal, I'm just, this is my theory. No, but it is interesting. You see, I'm looking at both again on the screen here. That I have domestic or intent to travel for those with children in the household is at 44% compared to those without at 38% last month. And the intent or overall safety rating, top two box, was 38% for those with children and 27% for those without. So fairly notable difference.
It's cool. It's good to know. Well, thank you so much.
I promised to answer the question about political party.
Oh, yeah, you did. That's right.
And just so nobody feels cheated on the call, I will share that Republicans actually report a fair degree higher intent to travel and overall higher perception of safety when traveling than Democrats, and with independents pretty much in the middle, as you would expect. But it's about a 10-point delta between Republicans and Democrats on that question, or on those questions.
So all of our digital marketing campaigns should really lean right.
There's probably a few other factors to be considered, but yeah, it is an interesting crosstab of the data for sure.
And Eric and Kitty, we're not making any political judgments.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. We're an apolitical organization.
Indeed.
That does not mean that Eric and I are apolitical. I'm speaking on behalf of the organization.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate your time. You're welcome to stay. I'm going to do a quick marketing update and just share a couple of slides with everyone as we close out over the next 10 minutes. Mark, if you would advance. As I share with you each week, this is our weekly website performance. Last week was actually a pretty good week. We accomplished a couple of things. We optimized our digital buy, our cost per click went down, and our efficiencies went up. We also introduced a radio campaign in markets that I'll share in just a minute across the Midwest within about a 350-mile radius, in addition to introducing billboards supporting the radio and digital buy in several of those markets. And I'm going to share a sample of the billboard with you in just a couple of slides ahead. So we're pleased with the volume of website activity. But Mark, if you go to the next slide, the fact that that we've reached a plateau of occupancy, we've had conversation with many, including internally, in reference to this, and I've heard from many hotels throughout the community that this is what you're experiencing. You know, we had consecutive growth over about 12 weeks from the depth of the pandemic inception to about, I would say about 6-7 weeks ago, and we are hovering at about 39.6% occupancy. We broke through, I think, 1 week, just over 40. And we've also talked about the fact that much of this occupancy is centered on the weekend time period, with the peak being in excess of 50 points on Saturday and in the high 40s on Friday. And then the low point, of course, as we would customarily expect and experience, would be on Sunday and Monday nights. We're hoping that Cardinal baseball resumes, because I think Cardinal baseball, particularly when we're playing homestands in St. Louis, we can generate some additional transient activity during the week. We're doing everything that we can to promote deals and discounts and the safety of hotels and all the great things that people can do, see, and enjoy as far as the attractions of St. Louis. So it's a little frustrating that within this finite audience of individuals, namely leisure travelers who are slightly more affluent than the average, as Chris just shared, who are slightly older, probably have presence of kids in the household, and they're probably traveling with their kids. There just aren't enough of them right now to really drive this occupancy north. And but we're going to keep working at it, and appreciate all of your support and your ideas as to what we can do together to move that needle. I mentioned radio, and Mark, if you go to the next slide, these are all of the markets where we're presently running radio. Where in each one of these markets, we're on roughly 4 or 5 stations. We're always on the top performing stations in each one of the markets that we're advertising in. We have an assortment of 30-second spots that I played 1 or 2 samples last week that feature Todd Thomas, the MC of the Cardinals. We did pivot from what we originally had recorded that was very centered on, coming out and having a game day experience in St. Louis and enjoy attractions while you're at it. Obviously, that proved to not be the right move coming out of the gate, as we got 5 games in, and the rest, as they say, is Cardinal Nation frustration. Hopefully, we'll be back maybe this weekend. But in any event, we re-recorded 4 spots. We talk about all the attractions in the community, and they're running over the course of 8 weeks that began on the 3rd of August that will carry through the end of September. We're also looking at furthering that fall flight, because I think that fall activity, I think we have every reason to believe, given what Chris just shared, that we can see some good leisure transient activity through the fall. Marcus, if you go to the next slide, I promised to share our digital billboard. We used an emoji. We actually had to do this in part because it is a requirement of the state of Missouri and the grant that we're presently tapping into that is derived from the CARES Act, that we talk about the actions that our community has taken to prevent the spread of COVID. You'll see a cut line in the outdoor board that says masks are not optional. We wanted to do so, extending that message in a fashion that was affirmative and upbeat and consistent with a consumer approach to marketing. And that's why we kind of lightened things up with the "yes, we're open" and the emoji. So this outdoor billboard is on 15 boards in the markets that are indicated on the slide. Go to the next. We're also supporting the digital marketing, the outdoor billboards, the radio advertising. We've talked about this previously. I think you're all aware of the fact that we have kind of a cool social media program that we're calling Where's Todd the Tourist. Every third day, so twice a week, Todd visits another attraction. We're getting fantastic engagement from folks. We're getting hundreds of people that are guessing where he is, and we're giving away ticket prize packages, 4 packs to the attraction that he was visiting. We're actually going to be conducting another series of attraction visits next week. We've got another list of attractions. So by the time we reach the fall time period, Todd will have visited virtually every attraction in the community, and encourage folks to come out and have a tourism experience at said attraction. And I think that, you know, given some of the metrics that we're seeing from an engagement perspective, this campaign is really taking off, and we're super pleased with it. So then we came up with another idea. Now, assuming we get Cardinal baseball back, one of the things that is always kind of fun at a Cardinal game is when Todd is inviting the crowd to do the wave. Well, we can't do the wave. So assuming we get back in action with respect to baseball, how about doing a virtual wave? So we're going to invite contestants throughout the region, as well as visitors alike, to record a wave. And he explains to them how to do it in a video that we just put together. And we are going to attempt to achieve a record for the longest virtual wave ever created, that we will stitch together and put a music backdrop to it, and we'll have our virtual version of a Cardinal wave. So in any event, that's something that we have to look forward to, that we're going to be filming next week. Eric, can you do the wave, or is that going to hurt your shoulder?
I could do the one-arm wave.
All right, next slide, please, Mark. I just want to remind everyone that we have put a toolkit together to help underscore and build confidence with meeting professionals, that we here at America Center and all of our hotel partners throughout the community and venue partners have collectively a lot of experience and expertise in conducting meetings in the present environment. We've created this page. It's called Meet St. Louis Responsibly. It goes on and on. There are probably about a dozen case studies that are featured in that content now. And I just want to remind all the venues that are on the call right now and all the hotels to supply us with your pictures and descriptions, because we would love for your content to be part of this narrative. We're going to be uploading today American Ninja Warrior and some production shots and a description of the exciting entire 8-episode season that was filmed here at the Dome at America Center and in halls 4 and 5 during the month of July, predominantly during the month of July. It began late June, it went all the way through almost the end of July. And there was about 5,000 hotel rooms associated with that production. Scores and scores of local tradespersons were brought out to support the production. As Kitty had brought up the other day, lots of equipment rentals. We were full of lifts and carts and all kinds of apparatus, vans to get people around. So it was a really big deal, and it was a great production. You're going to be seeing that in the news beginning in about 2 minutes. At 4 p.m., American Ninja Warriors making their announcement that the season, and I can spill the beans, right, Kitty? It's 2 minutes away. Season debuts September 7th on NBC. Tune in and check out the competition. Next slide, Marcus. So I mentioned to you last week that we are creating, in support of all of our wonderful restaurants throughout the community, a Takeout Tuesday series of activities. So every Tuesday is Takeout Tuesday. We're coming up with themes. We're inviting all of you to share these posts and to help us amplify this notion of supporting all of our restaurants by taking out on Tuesday. Every Tuesday, we'll have some different ideas as to places that you can go and some delicious takeout that you can enjoy. I'm going to wrap up with 2 quick slides because I don't want to go over our time, and I got 1 minute left. Influencers and writers. We're hosting a bunch of influence and writers over the next month. Really exciting that they're coming back out. Got aligned with a travel and leisure reporter, got aligned with Condé Nast, got a couple of influencers coming up that we're going to be hosting in St. Louis, and there's more to come, and I will keep you posted moving forward. Last slide. Okay, we're going to put this in the recap so that you all have the information, but American Express, and thank you, Peggy Lentz, for bringing this to our attention. American Express is running a special promotion for small businesses that you can register to participate in at no expense to you by the 23rd of August, and that for every $10 that a card holder would spend in one of your businesses, the card member is going to receive a $5 statement credit. So this promotion is going to be in effect between now and September 20th, 2020. They have marketing materials. We're going to give you the links. We're going to give you the information so that that you can see if you qualify to participate. So with that, Kitty, back to you. I think it's 4 p.m.
I think you're right. So the last thing I want to say is, in case you didn't notice, there's a little sign behind me on this side welcoming Arbonne. Our team did a really great job yesterday, and I wanted to give a shout out to them. I know our hotel partners were doing the same thing. We have a group for 2022 that we're working to try to get confirmed. Arbonne, you can see there. And so, you know, they couldn't do a normal site visit, so they had to do a virtual site visit. And the team did a great job of putting together our 360 virtual tour module that we have on our website, but also actually doing a walking handheld tour with our team, going through and showing the building. And then that was of America Center yesterday, and in the days previous, similar tours were done of some of the key hotels. And I think, you know, at a time when the customers can't get here to see us, it's a way for us to continue to move forward to book business. And so a great shout out to them. And also for any of you who would like some advice or assistance on how we did that for showcasing your own venues to your own potential customers, we are happy to help. So please let us know, and we'll jump right in. We need to win. We need to keep winning some business. And so I think you've got a good demonstration today of how we can continue to do that with all of you as our partners. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to let you go, and we will see you all next week. Take care.